I played well over 2,000 hours of Lost Ark since launch, and previously also played on the Russian and Korean version. I also got a Grandmaster in PvP, and as of making this video, we're also working on killing the hardest boss fight currently available, which is Inferno Valtan.
Red buff.
No.
Oh,
Split them.
dead.
Spoilers, it's pretty hard. I also collected almost every Mokoko and, well, collectible in the game, up until the point where you basically, well, have enough of it and you basically understand what's going on. And this is my current roster. There's also some timestamps below, so if you want to zap through and just watch like specific things like the pay to win stuff or the PvP stuff, then that should all be available below as well. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I hope this is helpful. So, is Lost Ark pay to win? I'll talk about the endgame systems in further detail later on, and obviously introducing all of the materials and stuff, but for now, yes, Lost Ark has many different pay-to-win elements. There are a couple of important differences though to other pay-to-win games such as World of Warcraft or Black Desert Online. Structured PvP, for example, including ranked PvP, is completely gear equalized, and the hardest difficulty of boss fights, called Inferno mode, is also completely equalized, besides the copious amounts of potions you need, but you know, that's a different topic. And there's even one more redeeming factor here, and that is that the most endgame raids are more decided by like your group synergy and understanding of the mechanics rather than gear itself. Gear will obviously help you progress raids faster, meaning you have a less normal attack patterns because the more gear you have, the more damage, and therefore you progress the boss's cycles more often, right? But it doesn't really make or break the fights in almost all cases, because the berserk timers outside of Inferno mode are actually very lenient, so you can even have a couple people dead and you can easily make it. You can pay to win through selling cash up currency for gold, which is used to buy literally any upgrade material in the game, by the way. So if you can obtain gold through, well, real money means, that's always incredibly useful. Or you can sell costumes on the market, or similar things at least. Mary's shop offers straight up materials and other useful items as well, and there's a soft subscription that if you have that every month will cost you a couple of crystals as well. There's also other things like Pheons. I will talk about those bad boys later, okay? So is Lost Ark pay to win? Yes, obviously it's not as bad as in other games, and there are exceptions to that rule, but for the most part you can gain a significant advantage by paying money. Now that that is out of the way, let's start from the beginning. Character creation. Decent overall with a lot of ways to customize your character. As long as you don't want to play like a bald female character, which actually I wanted to make, you can essentially create anything you want. It's pretty vast and you can do a lot with it. Skins can also be dyed with cash up materials. You occasionally get from events as well. One major downside that the Western version has though is the scarcity of those new skin releases. Although other versions have an entire library available, we get the short end of the stick here. So if you want to have a transmog competition or something of the sort,
I'm gonna test my drill on this midget. What the fuck?
you will probably have to, you know, wait a couple years until that's actually interesting, or you will just see the same 3 different skins that are currently available. During the leveling process, you will also get introduced to the combat and environments of the game. Lost Ark is an Unreal Engine 3 game, but looks and feels way better, honestly. For comparison, Elion is also an Unreal 3 game, and, you know, no comment. Lost Ark combat is very smooth and straightforward, very limited animation cancelling, but in return, great polish and satisfying like combat feedback. There are no real tanks in Lost Ark, so the fluidity of abilities and movement is very important, and honestly, for the most part, they did nail that. Environments are incredibly well done. The attention to detail and polish is honestly something other MMOs and ARPGs need to take note of. It's incredible animations too, by the way. Portoik is my personal favorite. It's a great continent, a little island with tiny people, and it makes you feel very immersed, and I think just the environments in general are great. There's one thing though about environments and like the backdrop of things that is a little bit depressing for an MMORPG, that is, and that is just the lack of interactability. So while the world looks super pretty and advanced and polished, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. The life skills, which we will get into later, are very bare bones, and there's not a whole lot going on outside of it looking nice. I hate having to press G to jump down or up something. Feels very, well, restrictive, and inside sometimes it also feels very frustrating. Like Bernese Forest, like who the fuck actually designed this horrible map? Please end me. The endgame of the endgame of Lost Ark starts at level 50, rewarding you with even more quest lines, but also introducing the actual gameplay loop. Una's tasks, which are actually the most basic shit dailies you will ever see in any game ever. I fall asleep regularly while doing these, and they also have a reputation system behind them, which basically just means you have to do them like 20 times and you get something for it. So it's nothing crazy. There's 3 daily Una tasks and there's 3 weekly Una tasks per character, which can also include a PvP weekly. Then you have the 2 Guardian raids per day per character, which a lot of people don't like to do that many times, and people even asked that that would be changed maybe to once per day, but that's not going to happen, let's be honest. These Guardian raids are very much inspired by Monster Hunter, by the way. Then you have life skill energy and estate missions. Abyss Dungeons, which is weekly per character. Abyss Raid, which is Argos, which is also weekly per character. You've Challenge Guardians, these are 3 times per week per account or roster, and Challenge Abyss, which is also weekly per roster. Then you also have Adventure Islands, Chaos Gates, and World Bosses. Those are daily depending on the day. There's always an Adventure Island every day, and on the weekends there's actually 2. These are considered scheduled content basically, because you have a little schedule at the top left and that will showcase, well, what's going to happen next, which makes it a little feel again a little bit like a timer. You're always on a timer in this game. You kind of have to do your things in between these events. Usually they're every hour or at the half-hour mark for some guild events as well. These make more parts of the world relevant in a positive way, but they also make the game feel, well, restricted again, and make you waste a lot of time just waiting for an island to spawn or a boss to spawn, since there's no rest system or anything like that. So if you miss out on one of the days of doing like a world boss, for example, there won't be like 2 world bosses the next day waiting. There's also capture events, which are the guild events I just mentioned, PvP islands, event islands, and weekly vendors, and even more weekly vendors, by the way, with guild events, guild vendors, PvP vendors. All of those things are normally and usually on a weekly basis. That also includes normal events as well. Oh, and of course there's Boss Rush and Cube, which are both not more than a weekly chore, unfortunately, and Throne Spire, which is a 10-minute mini solo dungeon that was also quite, yeah, disappointing. As you have already realized by now, there's a reason why a lot of people say they're doing homework but playing Lost Ark. It's a theme park MMORPG, well, something like retail World of Warcraft, but with a massive shopping list worth of things to do. Repetitive but rewarding. There are a lot of problems with this. There's a lot of problems with such game design, especially considering that you can do more the more characters you have, but then you will just be doing more of the same with a different class. So with all of this shopping lists and all of these things not sounding super interesting, why do people really play Lost Ark in the long term? That's probably because of Legion commander raids and a couple of other things that I'll mention later. Let's get into that one first. Legion commander raids, which are, well, easily the most well-designed content in the game, also weekly per character, by the way, up to 3 different ones. In the long term, you can only do 3 of those a week per character. These raids also come in varying difficulty levels, from rehearsal level, which we don't have yet, by the way, which is a practice mode. This will be available once we get to Kakul, Seidon, or the Clown. And this one is basically just an equalized, well, practice mode, right? Then you have normal mode and hard mode, which I don't really have to explain, I don't think. And then we have Inferno mode. Inferno mode is, well, the hardest difficulty, but also equalized in gear, meaning you can't outgear it and you can't cheese it in a gear sense, or in that way at least, which makes the fight significantly harder in and of itself. But it also has additional mechanics and additional achievements. So before I go into like proper detail here, let's talk about all of the progression systems in place vertically and horizontally as well. And then later on we'll come back and revisit all of these endgame content pieces and review them properly in detail, and what that really entails, what the rewards look like, and you know how that all like comes together at the end. First is vertical progression. You can upgrade or hone your gear to higher levels with varying degrees of RNG depending on the level and the rarity of the item. At higher levels, this is literally just a slot machine, but there's also a lot to be gained, including your weapon glow that changes depending on how high your weapon is upgraded. Upgrading the quality of that gear, so for your armor and your weapon, is also a lot of RNG, but that also gives you a significant damage increase, or, well, defensive increase, health increase as well, depending on which piece you're trying to upgrade. By the way, the quality upgrading of the gear is usually a long-term thing anyways, so the heavy RNG doesn't feel as bad unless you want to force your way into a high quality. High level gems, which can be acquired by combining gems you drop up until level 10. For reference, you nearly need 20,000 gems for one level 10 gem. By the way, you can equip 11 of those. So that's a long time, or a lot of gold. This also has a 50-50 chance to either be a damage gem or a CDR gem if you upgrade it yourself. Meaning there's a lot of RNG in that too, so if you get a CDR gem, in most cases, that is worth almost half or less of a damage gem. Tripods, which are currently undergoing rework in Korea, so probably maybe if you watch this video a year later, it's probably not going to be relevant. But these ones are currently also heavy RNG, and they will stay RNG even in the new system. But they're working on it to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more, well, easy to set your things up. Then we also have card sets or cards. These are also heavy RNG, as you need to open, well, booster packs to have a chance at the best cards. It is although pretty easy to get a very decent baseline card set for example, 7% crit or damage reduction or something of the sorts. So it's not super necessary to have the highest card set here, although maxed out this can give you up to 15% bonus damage increase depending on the boss fight, or even more than that actually if the boss is weak to light damage. Fun fact, there used to be a playable card game back in the day as well, which has since been removed unfortunately. Then we have engravings. These are acquired by 2 book slots on your character. The biggest casino game of Lost Ark, ability stones and accessories, which you can buy directly from the market or drop them yourself. These can heavily enhance or change the playstyle of your character. The class specific ones especially can act like almost like a subclass in other MMORPGs. I just want to complain real quick how horrible the stats and engravings are that aren't meta in this game. Well, the meta in Lost Ark is very rigid, and well, usually doesn't change a whole lot, because most engravings and most stats in the game are completely useless and outside of very niche situations. So obviously in equalized content you can swap your gear around, so sometimes you see some more specialized builds there, but the usual character either has swiftness, crit, or spec. Now the problem with that is obviously that a lot of accessories and items you get will never be worth anything, and even niche builds almost never stray from the, well, cookie cutter 10 engravings. We should also not forget set effects which aren't bound to your class. These can be obtained by defeating different Legion Commander raids. We'll get into more details later. The last significant vertical progression point would be skill points, which can also be seen as horizontal progression, by the way, because you obtain those by collectibles and other things that are not necessarily connected to, you know, combat. All of these vertical progression systems I just mentioned can also be purchased through gold, outside of obviously skill points. Even for the set effects, you can buy additional chests at the end of a raid with gold, and obviously you can also buy carries or buses, which people often actually use that have a little bit too much money and just want to get carried through a raid. As we already mentioned, Lost Ark doesn't have too many competitive events outside of maybe GVG where gear actually matters, so it's not super bad in that sense. Now for horizontal progression, which honestly I think is one of the better things that Lost Ark has to offer, and well, for collectors this is actually quite interesting. There are a lot of different things to collect, one more coming soon in an upcoming patch in Korea actually. From Okoko seeds to island hearts, sea bounties, and more. These are great for collectors, and there's plenty to explore in that department. Definitely nothing groundbreaking, but certainly something to keep collectors busy for a while. These also have fairly significant rewards, from skill points to straight up gold. For example, to get an Ignite token, you need to complete the entirety of one continent's adventure tome, which, well, has all kinds of different challenges, but let's talk about one in specific here. Rapport. Rapport is probably the worst system in the entire game. and is basically like an affection system for NPC characters. Essentially a daily grind where you twerk in front of a bear or some weird shit and then play a song, and then the character likes you a little bit more. There's not really a whole lot to this besides that is a daily grind. But Smilegate obviously understands that too, that is horrible content and no one wants to do it. So they implemented rapport gifts. Rapport gifts are essentially items that you directly gift to the character. And with that, obviously the character gets a significant amount of rapport or affection to you. These can mostly be bought from the cash shop, which is not very surprising. But there's also a second way to do this. If you are cheap like me and you don't like spending money, then you can also do, well, something called traveling merchant grind. That means merchants spawn all over the map, all over the continents, every 30 to 60 minutes, depends on the day. It's probably a little bit more sometimes as well, and are tracked by like a couple different websites. The most notable one is probably lostmerchants.com, where you can basically track all of the traveling merchants on your server, and people basically sign up and showcase, oh, this guy has this one today, there's this traveling merchant, and so on, which basically just makes it another daily grind, to be honest. Honestly, just fucking remove rapport. No one needs that. I don't know, like fucking hell, dude. I honestly, I did rapport for like 9, almost 10, maybe 11 continents now, and it's fucking dreadful. I wouldn't recommend. Of course, there's also other things like achievements and titles and, well, all the basic stuff you would imagine in an MMO. Now let's continue with raiding. And we'll start off with the first real raid experience, Argos. This is a 3-instance fight or 3-boss fight that requires decent amounts of coordination and practice. Well, it's not really a 3-boss fight because it's just 3 phases of the same boss, but you get me. This is unfortunately often just a carry run, as the item level requirement of the characters is 1370, while actually doing the last phase of the boss requires an item level of 1400. And for some goddamn reason, your character's attacks have a pretty high chance to get straight up blocked and avoided, even if you have like half an item level below the threshold. Why is that? I have no idea. I don't know why you would want to design your raid like this, where you can only kill the first boss, but you can stay inside of the raid for the other phases as well, and basically be pretty fucking useless. The raid even has a matchmake button, which obviously always only does the first phase, because most people just matchmake at 1370, and then they're useless in the later phases of the fight. And that's the main reason why this is also the main raid where people want to buy a bus for. A bus is basically a carry in Lost Ark. Now, obviously, they most often do this on a 1370 character, because the 1370 character can get all of the rewards even after phase 3, but is just combat-wise useless. So that means this is basically the raid that encourages getting carried, because you actually make more gold if you go to P3 with a carry, even after paying the carry, than you would if you just did phase 1. So, although I have to say, if you actually do the carrying yourself and you carry 6 people through the raid as a 2-man party, it's actually super fun. So I would definitely recommend anyone who has high enough item level and good enough understanding of the fight to do some carry runs. Those are quite challenging. And now for the actual endgame of Lost Ark. Legion Commander Raids. You can enter the first one, Valtan, at 1415, and you can do both phases on that item level. As mentioned before, these bosses reward materials for set crafting and are generally regarded as the reason why most people stick to the game long term. Challenging mechanics, one mistake could kill you, great rewards, great design, and content that actually feels meaningful, especially when you can progress it blind without guides, which obviously nowadays is not super easy to do, because the raids are obviously also released in other regions before ours. But generally speaking, if you can find a blind group, that's super fun. You can do up to 3 Legion Commanders a week per character. At the time of making this video, we only have 2, Valtan and VYKIS. These bosses have up to 4 difficulty levels: Rehearsal, Normal, Hard, and Inferno, which I already talked about earlier. But let's just talk about Inferno mode real quick again. This one is essentially just for the people looking for prestige, glory, and depression, as your gold will get slowly siphoned out of your pockets, chugging potions and tossing grenades without anything to show for, unfortunately. This mod also equalized completely, which means no pay to win and no outgearing. New mechanics, tighter DPS checks, and no room for error, and on top of it all, well, no checkpoints. So that means if you leave the raid after killing the first boss, you have to start from scratch again the next day. Oh, and did I tell you about the Demon's Roar icon achievement? This awards you with the best looking title in the game, or rather the icon next to the title, and requires you to clear the entire raid without a single death across your entire raid party. That means not a single death across an entire 8-man group. So if someone dies at the very end of the final boss, you gotta do the entire thing again, starting from the first boss. There's one problem with Inferno mode though: zero replayability. There's few people even attempting Hell mode in the first place, and almost no one would do it a second time, as there's zero vertical rewards or even cosmetic rewards droppable. Our Western version actually got the Yaz's Jar legendary skin removed recently, probably due to the gambling laws changing and pay to win concerns, right? I think this would be the perfect place to reintroduce those legendary skins as a reward for clearing the hardest content of the game. And then last but certainly least is the guild raids of Lost Ark. These are a 10-second endeavor similar to bikini skin owner seeing a real woman for the first time. Now for skins. There are a lot of skins in Lost Ark, most of which are held hostage in Korea, while we get one skin drip fed every other patch. But the older ones are generally not dyeable, and the well, new ones are as well. So that's also something to keep an eye out. Just look at the text below the skin if it's actually dyeable or not. Dyes are given out fairly regularly as well, or can be purchased from the cash shop. Generally high quality, but also often Coomer bait. Let's talk about the auction house for a second. The auction house is split into two different parts and is often a little bit confusing for new players, but you get used to it pretty quickly. Other than that, fairly straightforward, well, until we talk about Pheons. Pheons are Lost Ark's way to regulate the blue crystal versus royal crystal exchange rates, and also a way to prevent flipping certain items on the market. Blue crystals, by the way, are basically crystals you can buy with gold or royal crystals, and royal crystals are straight up just a cash shop currency. Armors, weapons, and ability stones require a flat Pheon fee whenever purchased. The problem is the flat Pheon fee, making even items sold for 1 gold still incredibly pricey depending on the current gold exchange rate. This results in a market where only the best items are valuable, and everything below that will either never sell or go for comically low prices. This also makes off-meta builds very risky to invest into, as you often need another full set of gear to swap to something else. On top of that, making alts and gambling ability stones on any character becomes incredibly draining for your wallet, either in-game or through pay to win. Life skills. Oh boy! As you can see, there's like 4 fish in Lost Ark. And as you also can see, the most valuable one is called fish. So I think this kind of gives you a pretty good idea already how in-depth this kind of life skilling is in Lost Ark. The fish prices are also incredibly low because of the bots, by the way, but like that's a completely different topic, honestly. I wish I made this up. All the other life skills are basically just pressing G on a resource that respawns at the same spot every single time, with very minor variation outside of maybe excavating, which is just slightly more complex. No real rare materials, no exploration, and even worse, the talent trees for most of the life skills are so bad that some high-level abilities are literally fucking useless, to the point of making a character actually worse at the life skill or consuming more energy than needed. And again, Smilegate understands how bad they are as well, so you can purchase potions that not only give you more life skill energy, but also consume it up to 3 times faster. You can also just automatically harvest stuff in your estate as well. Possibly the worst life skills I've ever seen in any MMO ever, honestly. There's so many good things about the game, but oh boy, life skills are not one of them. And speaking of the estate, there's also called Stronghold. is your own personal island, including buildings and things to upgrade. For the WoW players among you, it's basically just an advanced garrison. It even comes with a mission board too. For housing enthusiasts and people who just want to show off their achievements by placing statues and other rewards around the plot, this is actually pretty nice. And there's also some advancements planned in the future. They always want to keep moving that forward, and there's a lot of new stuff coming for the strongholds very soon. And let's also touch on ships and ocean content for a little bit. A lot of things to collect through different ship blueprints, sailors, and island hearts that also grant you boni while on islands or traveling the oceans. Islands play a big role here too, especially in low-level content, as they provide with sometimes very well-made quest lines and rewards as well. In Endgame, however, ship content becomes mainly a matter of I need to get to the scheduled event as fast as possible, let's go. So having a fast ship can be nice, but most of the time you just look at the event schedule and you auto swim your way to the island. Cool idea, but definitely shallow in its design. Now for the selected few who actually love MMORPG PvP, like me. Lost Ark's PvP has an amazing baseline, cool and satisfying combos, fluid combat, great animations, and also great for spectators, as top-down games usually, are easier to follow than third-person ones. For the most part of Lost Ark, before its Western release, I exclusively played PvP, basically doing nothing else. Thousands of games, and eventually end up in top 30 of the Russian server, and then eventually Grandmaster in hours. All that being said though, PvP is fucking dead. And here's why. So just for comparison, we're currently on the Lost Ark YouTube channel of Korea. And as you can see here, there's a couple different videos. This here is called the Royal Roaders Championship, which is basically a national Korean championship where they compete for the rank 1 in PvP. And as you can see, these have like 7,000 viewers. The live stream had like 50,000 views, 1.5, 2.4, and so on. While after that, they had like some happy birthday celebration for the Mokoko seed, which has 460,000 views. So yeah, I mean, can we really blame them to not push PvP, or is it more of a chicken and the egg kind of problem, where because the PvP is trash, they don't keep developing it, or the PvP stays trash because no one actually likes to play it, but Smilegate also doesn't want to invest anything into it, so it will just stay horrible? I'm not entirely sure. So why is no one playing the game anymore in general? Like what actually happened? Why does no one play PvP in Lost Ark? Well, first of all, it's very confusing for new players. There are a lot of unintuitive systems that make the entry level for PvP fairly high. The most prominent one is probably that both teams have completely different viewpoints depending on their spawn location. That means if you see someone on your far left or right, they can't see you because to them you're either at the top or the bottom. This problem is made even worse when forced 21:9 resolution is considered, which is honestly mandatory for PvP. Even a lot of PvE players buy a widescreen monitor, as forced 21:9 and 16:9 on a 16:9 looks just very small and ugly. There's also non-existent matchmaking, so normal games try to match you with other people of similar PvP level. By the way, that's not ranked. But classes and roles aren't considered whatsoever, and there's even a map that provides like some bug chicken in the middle, and that bug has been in the game for fucking decades, so I don't know what's even going on there. And you also obviously have ranked matchmaking. Even at launch or on a hyper popular, server like Korea, the matchmaking in ranked is a hot mess, let's be honest. The game often prioritizes mirror matches over actual ranked points. That means every now and then a top 10 player will be matched with a platinum player or even lower to compensate for the lack of player engagement, or to force a mirror matchup because the game just loves to put you in mirror matches in ranked. Also, the game tries to never put two of the same classes in one team, unless that's in both teams in ranked, and also does not consider support as an individual role. That means some teams will have two supports while the other one has none. It just never is actually balanced, and it's very frustrating, especially for new players. Seasons are also way too long, and in some regions also sporadically extended. The rewards are mediocre too, and for people like me that don't play too many alts, the weekly mats that you get from the vendor are nice, but also nothing super helpful. They even removed the PvP specific skins recently for this season. And probably the biggest point is the lack of depth. Most games that are solely focused on an arena deathmatch format die out rather quickly, and Lost Ark is no exception. Outside of combat and positioning, there's really nothing else to think about. No purchasing of items, no wave control, no ability upgrades, or anything like that. Lost Ark doesn't even have cleansing or something to counter shields and buffs. When an enemy bard uses their awakening, which gives their entire team a shield, all you can really do is run away from it, and 99% of the time that's literally all you can do. No counterplay whatsoever. It just lacks depth and outplay potential at the highest level, which is why the top ranked players mostly just play at the start and end of the season. In summary, Lost Ark PvP will probably never be good, unfortunately, as much as I want it to be, because I'm a PvP player at heart as well. There's too many problems, and they don't also invest too much time into balancing the classes too much, well, individually at least in PvP, because obviously PvP and PvE in MMOs have overlap. So if they probably, for example, they buffed the Paladin Ultimate Awakening a while back, that you don't have to stand in the circle anymore, and that made the class's Awakening in PvP completely broken, and they didn't acknowledge this, well, until today. Even in the one patch where they tried to balance damage reductions, they didn't even address shields at all. And I think that's not even the problem. I think the problem is the interactability with shields and buffs and stuff, like in other games like WoW, where you can purge your target, you can kick your target out of an ability very easily, which is a different type of CC. It also doesn't exist in Lost Ark in the same way. Most of the time a PvP balance patch maybe drops like once every 6 months or something. So yeah, it's probably not gonna happen. Now, before we get into the conclusion and summary, I just wanted to mention how Western release has been handled by Smilegate and Amazon Game Studios. The class releases are way too slow for the sake of hype and content stalling, which in return turns off a lot of players whose classes aren't ready yet, which hurts the game significantly in the long run. The queue times were horrendous on launch as well, and AGS's response for the EU Central server was to open up a completely new region called EU West, which can't interact or server transfer to EU Central. This was basically the nail in the coffin for everyone who didn't know the specifics for, well, what they're getting themselves into in EU West. And well, the long term and population of that region is already very, very, very grim. EU West was a short-term band-aid fix that in return forces players that have invested hundreds and maybe thousands of hours into the game to hard reroll to EU Central because their region is dying. And let's be honest, how many people feel motivated to start again from scratch after that? Also, the bot situation. Bots have been running rampant since launch, and at one point we're close to 10 bots per one player, or that's at least an estimation. They've been terminating a lot of bots and RMT accounts recently though. Well, honestly, although after all of that, it's probably still around 100,000 bots left, so probably one bot per one player. Bots running wild with exploits and cheating is also being rarely detected. So there's a lot of ways of bots to just circumvent the easy anti-cheat and just kill bosses they shouldn't be able to, or kill fights like the Throne Spire, which rewards legendary engraving books so the bots can make even more gold. And the last problem we had was the lack of communication in regards to content releases in general. For example, Argos was announced one day before it's actually released, and everyone was super upset about that. So in summary, would I recommend you guys that haven't played it before, or maybe people that want to come back, to play Lost Ark? Now that's a tricky question, because I think in a lot of ways you guys could tell that there were a lot of negative points to the game as well. And I personally, I've played over 2,000 hours now, right? So I am very burned out, especially out of the daily stuff. But I have to say, for people who like raiding and people who like to play multiple characters, I think Lost Ark is honestly a great game. If you're into playing multiple alts, progressing all of them, getting mats everywhere, and then putting that all into raiding and maybe carrying people through raids and stuff like that, I think Lost Ark is a great opportunity to do that. And also I think Collectibles Lost Ark does pretty well. everything else though, I would probably say there's other games out there that will fill the need better. And then the super long term, so if you have played as many hours as me, the dailies and the alt dailies and the lack of life skilling and PvP is, well, at least for me, a little problematic. And that being said, I have played over 2,000 hours of Lost Ark, right? And usually I get burned out after like 200 out of an MMO. So that alone should probably speak to its positives as well. So overall, I think the game can do a lot to improve itself in a lot of departments. But at the same time, what it does do right, it does very well. And it's still a fairly polished experience overall. And it's a free-to-play game. So if you haven't tried it out, why not just give it a try and see for yourself? And that's basically it. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing. I'm also going to check out all the new MMOs that are coming out in the future. And obviously, I will also keep doing some Lost Ark content here and there as well. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the support for Lost Ark. Appreciate it. And see you in the next one. Peace.